Stop for a moment and really pay attention, because what you are about to hear is not just another story about animals. It is something far deeper than that. It is about what happens inside a human soul when it shares life with a creature that asks for nothing and yet quietly changes everything around it. If you have a cat at home or you've ever had one, this might feel strangely familiar. And if you have never lived with one, it still matters, because in truth, this is not only about cats. It is about you, your inner world, and the kind of love that does not speak loudly but transforms everything it touches. Years ago, after a mass, an elderly woman in her 60s came to speak with me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but not the kind that come only from sadness. It was something more complex, a mixture of grief and relief, as if her heart was trying to understand two opposite feelings at the same time. She told me she had lost her cat the week before. They had been together for 12 years. Then she said something that stayed with me. She asked, "Father, why does it hurt so much if it was just an animal?" I stayed silent for a moment and then answered her honestly. "Who told you it was just an animal?" Because nothing that has shared your nights, nothing that has rested beside you when you were exhausted, nothing that has silently stayed near you when you were crying without even understanding why, can be called just anything. That cat was part of your story. It witnessed your life in a way very few beings ever do, and losing it is not simply losing a pet. It is losing a presence that carried pieces of your daily existence, and that already reveals something important about human destiny. Our lives are not only shaped by big events. Most of what we become is formed in the quiet presence of small companions, in the routines we barely notice, in the living beings that slowly shape our inner world without us realizing it. Sometimes destiny is not written in dramatic moments, but in silent company. Very few people reflect on this, but in ancient civilizations, especially in Egypt, which existed alongside the early biblical world, cats were not treated as ordinary animals. They were observed with deep respect, not because people blindly worshiped them, but because they noticed something in their behavior that modern life has almost forgotten. Cats can sit for hours in complete stillness, without anxiety, without rushing, without needing to escape silence with noise. The Egyptians described this as a kind of sacred presence. In other traditions, similar ideas appear under different names. In Buddhism, there is mindfulness, the ability to be fully present in the moment without distraction. In my own faith perspective, I would describe it as contemplation, the simple act of being without running away from the present. When a cat enters a home, even without being asked, something subtle begins to shift. It is not magic in the superficial sense. It is something more grounded and real. You begin, often without noticing, to learn a lesson that spiritual teachers across centuries have tried to explain in words, that the present moment is enough. I have a friend, a man in his 50s, extremely active, always busy, always planning, always thinking ahead. His mind rarely rests. One day, his daughter left her cat at his house while she traveled. At first he resisted the idea. He even said, "I am not a cat person." But the cat behaved as if it did not care about his resistance at all. It chose a place in his home, his favorite chair, the one he usually used for work or reading. Every evening, when he tried to sit there and focus on emails or tomorrow's responsibilities, the cat was already there, calm and unmoving, quietly present. It would curl up, breathe slowly, and simply exist in that space as if time itself had slowed down. After a few days, something changed in him. He began sitting differently. He started turning off his phone earlier. He noticed that his breathing slowed down without effort. He found himself resting in a way he had almost forgotten was possible. Later he told me, "That animal taught me how to stop." And I told him that perhaps what we call coincidence is sometimes just life, sending us a message in a language we are finally ready to understand. Science has studied this for years, but what matters is not just the data itself, but what it points toward. Research shows that interacting with cats can lower cortisol levels, the hormone associated with stress. Their purring, a unique vibration produced within a frequency range roughly between 25 and 150 hertz, has been linked in studies to potential benefits for bone healing, muscle recovery, and nervous system regulation. People who live with cats also tend to show lower cardiovascular risk factors. These are measurable effects, documented in scientific literature. But beyond the statistics, a deeper question arises. Is it not meaningful that a living creature carries within its body a natural rhythm that can calm the human nervous system? It makes you wonder whether life is more interconnected than we usually assume. Whether what we call nature is not just random behavior, but part of a much larger design that we are only beginning to understand. In Zen Buddhism, there is a concept that feels surprisingly close to what cats naturally embody. It is called mushin, often translated as no mind, a state in which a person acts without being trapped by overthinking, without the weight of ego, and without being pulled constantly between memories of the past and worries about the future. It is a form of awareness that is simple, direct, and fully present. Some Zen teachers have even said that if you want to understand meditation, you should observe a cat. Not because you should imitate its posture or try to copy its behavior, but because you should study its way of being. A cat does not apologize for existing. It does not question whether it deserves space. It does not try to become something it is not. It simply lives fully and naturally within the moment it is in. What Buddhism describes as enlightenment and what many Christian traditions describe as inner peace may sound different on the surface, but at a deeper level they point towards something similar. It is the state of a soul that has stopped fighting reality and has learned to rest in what is without constant resistance or escape. This raises a question that many people ask when they hear spiritual discussions about animals. Is it wrong to become too attached to a pet? Is it spiritually unhealthy to love an animal so deeply that its presence becomes important in your emotional world? The answer is not simple, because it depends on the nature of love itself. There is a kind of love that binds, that creates dependency, that causes suffering when it is lost because it is built on control or possession. That kind of attachment can become spiritually heavy. But there is another kind of love that opens the heart, that softens the human being, that teaches generosity without expectation. That kind of love does not imprison the soul, it expands it. And the relationship between humans and animals, when lived with awareness, often belongs to this second category. A cat does not lie to you. It does not pretend. It has no hidden agenda. It accepts you as you are, or it simply does not engage. This honesty, simple and unfiltered, creates a form of connection that is surprisingly pure. It is not complicated by social expectations or emotional manipulation. It is direct, quiet, and real. I remember a young man, about 25 years old, who was going through a deep depression. He had withdrawn from everyone. He stayed in his room most of the time, avoiding conversation, avoiding life itself. It felt as if he had slowly closed himself off from the world, like a flower that refuses to open because it no longer trusts the light. His mother, worried and almost desperate, brought a small cat into the home. It was not a carefully planned decision, more an act of intuition, a hope that something small might make a difference. At first, the young man ignored it completely. He did not react, did not engage, did not care. But the cat did not give up. It began to stay near him, quietly present, sitting on his bed, resting beside him without demand or pressure. Over time, something small but important began to change. The young man started to notice that there was another living being depending on the world around him, even in a very simple way. The cat needed food, it needed attention, it needed basic care, and slowly, without dramatic change or sudden healing, he began to wake up in the morning with something outside of himself to respond to. A small responsibility, a simple routine, a reason that was not overwhelming but still meaningful. Later he described it in a very simple way. He said, "That cat saved me, and I had no reason to doubt him." In psychology, this is known as animal-assisted support, and it has been studied in many contexts. But beyond technical terms, what it reveals is something deeply human. When a person feels completely alone, the presence of another living being can become the first thread that reconnects them to life. You cannot always heal someone with explanations. You cannot always bring them back with logic, but presence has a different power, and animals, especially cats, are masters of presence without words, without judgment, without expectation. There is another dimension to this that is often overlooked: the atmosphere of a home where a cat lives. Across many cultures and throughout history, cats have been seen as sensitive to the environment around them, not in a mystical or fantasy sense, but in the way they respond to emotional and behavioral changes within a space. People who live with cats often notice that these animals react to moods, tension, or emotional shifts before anything is verbally expressed. They seem to sense when something is off, when stress is present, or when a person is emotionally unsettled. Centuries ago, mystic writers like Hildegard of Bingen reflected on the subtle awareness found in creation. She did not describe it as superstition, but as a reminder that life is more complex and refined than human arrogance assumes. The natural world, in her view, carries a depth of sensitivity that modern minds sometimes overlook. This leads to a question that many people quietly wonder about. Do cats have a soul? The honest answer is that theology does not provide a definitive statement on this. but what can be observed is that they carry awareness, connection, and the ability to form meaningful bonds. They respond, they choose, they react, and they sometimes appear to understand emotional states in ways that go beyond simple instinct. Whether one defines that as soul or something else depends on belief, but it is difficult to deny that there is something more than mechanical behavior involved, and perhaps that is enough to invite respect rather than certainty. There is something deeply human about this uncertainty, because not everything meaningful in life can be measured or fully explained. Some things are known through experience rather than definition, and the bond between humans and cats often belongs to that category. I once knew an elderly couple, both nearing 70 years of age. They had spent most of their lives together. They raised children, went through financial difficulties, faced illness, and built a shared life that was full of both struggle and love. When their children grew up and left home, the house became quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind of silence that feels heavier with time. They did not speak about loneliness at first, but it was there. The rooms felt larger, the evenings longer, and the days less structured. In that emptiness, they made a simple decision. They adopted a cat, not as a solution to a problem, but almost as a quiet attempt to bring life back into the home. What happened next was not dramatic, but it was meaningful. The cat became part of their shared routine. They fed it together, they took it to the veterinarian together. They laughed together when it behaved in strange or playful ways during the night. Slowly, something shifted between them as well. They had something to talk about again, something to care for together. A small living presence that required attention, patience, and shared responsibility. It gave them a reason to coordinate, to connect, to participate in the same simple tasks again. The woman later told me something very direct. She said, "That cat gave life back to our marriage. Not because it solved all their problems or erased their past difficulties, but because it restored a sense of shared purpose. It reminded them that caring for something together is one of the oldest and most natural forms of human connection." This brings us to a reality that many people quietly experience but rarely or speak about openly: loneliness. Not the chosen kind of solitude that some people seek for reflection or peace, but the unwanted kind that arrives slowly over time. The kind that grows in empty homes, in quiet evenings, in long hours where no one calls and no one asks how you are. Modern research has shown that chronic loneliness is not just emotional discomfort. It has measurable effects on physical health. Some studies suggest that its impact on the body can be compared to habits like smoking over a long period of time. In other words, isolation is not only a psychological condition, it becomes a biological burden. And this is where the presence of a cat becomes more than just companionship. It does not solve every aspect of loneliness. It does not replace human relationships, but it interrupts isolation. It creates a form of daily interaction that is simple, consistent, and alive. A cat waits for you. It notices when you arrive, it responds when you move, it shares space with you without demanding explanation or conversation. In a world where many people will feel unseen, even this small form of recognition can carry significant emotional weight. There is a phrase in the book of Genesis that says it is not good for man to be alone. While that passage has many layers of meaning, one interpretation speaks directly to human experience. People are not designed to exist in complete emotional isolation. They need connection, even in small and simple forms. Sometimes that connection is found not in grand relationships or complex social structures, but in the quiet presence of another living being sitting beside you on a sofa without judgment or expectation. In Japanese philosophy, there is a concept called ikigai, which refers to a reason for being. It is not always something large or extraordinary. It can be a purpose found in very small things: a reason to wake up in the morning, a task that gives structure to the day, a living responsibility that quietly anchors a person to life. For some people, that reason might be a career or a mission. For others, it might be family. And for some, it can be something as simple as caring for a plant or a pet or a cat that depends on them in small but consistent ways. These small anchors should not be underestimated, because when larger meanings feel distant or uncertain, small responsibilities often keep life steady. Across different cultures and historical periods, cats have also been associated with something beyond daily life. In various traditions, they were seen as animals that exist at the boundary between what is visible and what is not easily explained. In medieval Europe, there were periods when cats were misunderstood. They were seen differently, as protectors of homes and silent guardians against harm. In Celtic folklore, they were believed to perceive things that humans could not easily detect. In Islamic tradition, cats were treated with notable respect and kindness, and historical accounts describe the prophet showing compassion toward them. In Japan, some temples still honor cats as symbolic protectors. These examples do not need to be taken as literal proof of anything supernatural, but they do show something important. Across very different cultures, people consistently notice that cats seem to live slightly apart from ordinary perception, as if they were aware of something more subtle in the world. And perhaps the real point is not mystery, but attention. Cats live with a level of awareness that many humans lose in modern life. They observe, they listen, they pause, and in doing so, they remind us of something we often forget, that not everything valuable in life is loud, fast, or constantly changing. There is a moment I want you to imagine for a second, not as an idea, but as something you actually pause and feel. Sitting in silence, without any distraction, no phone in your hand, no background noise filling the space, just you in the present moment. For many people today, that kind of silence feels unusual, even uncomfortable. Yet it is exactly in that silence that something important begins to return. Cats live in that space naturally. They do not rush to fill silence with activity or noise. They can sit for long periods without needing stimulation, simply observing what is around them, and in doing so, they offer a quiet example of something that modern life often forgets: presence without pressure. Throughout history, spiritual traditions have placed great value on silence, not as emptiness but as awareness. In Christian scripture, there are moments where God is not found in dramatic events like storms or fire, but in a gentle whisper. In Buddhist practice, silence is not avoidance but clarity. In both cases, the idea is similar. When everything external becomes quiet, something internal becomes clearer. Cats, without ever teaching or preaching, seem to embody this principle. They remind us that stillness is not wasted time. It is a state where the mind can settle and where life can be experienced without constant interpretation or distraction. There is also something remarkable about the way a cat's presence affects a space. Many people describe their homes feeling calmer when a cat is around. The animal does not try to create peace, yet its behavior naturally encourages it. It moves slowly, rests often, and pays attention to small details that humans tend to overlook. Scientific research has tried to understand this effect in measurable terms. One of the most discussed aspects is the cat's purring. This sound is not random. It is a consistent vibration produced within a frequency range that has been associated in studies with calming effects on the human nervous system. People often report feeling more relaxed when a cat is purring nearby, even without consciously focusing on it. From a physiological point of view, this interaction can influence heart rate, breathing patterns, and stress levels. From a human perspective, it simply feels like comfort, a quiet reminder that another living being is near, calm, and unthreatened. But beyond the science, there is a more subtle experience that many cat owners recognize. When a cat sits near you, especially during moments of rest or reflection, there is a sense of shared stillness. It is not active communication, it is presence, and presence in its simplest form can be deeply grounding. Some people even describe their cat as a silent companion during prayer or meditation, not because the animal participates in any ritual, but because it does not interrupt it. It allows space for focus, for calm, and for a kind of emotional stability that is difficult to explain in words. This brings us to an important question that often arises in spiritual discussions. When we form strong emotional bonds with animals, is that a form of attachment that needs to be controlled or avoided? The answer depends on the nature of that bond. There is attachment that restricts, that creates fear of loss, and that turns love into dependence. That kind of emotional holding can become painful and destabilizing. But there is also a different kind of connection, one that does not imprison the heart but softens it. One that teaches care, patience, and the ability to give without expectation of return. The relationship between humans and animals, when healthy and balanced, often belongs to this second category. It is not based on control or possession. It is based on shared existence. A cat does not demand emotional explanations. It simply lives near you, on its own terms, and allows you to be part of its world. This simplicity is powerful, because it removes the layers of performance and expectation that often complicate human relationships. What remains is something direct and honest: presence, care, and routine. I once heard about a young man in his mid-20s who was struggling with severe emotional distress. He had withdrawn almost completely from social life. His days were spent in isolation, with very little interaction or motivation to engage with the outside world. Over time, his routine disappeared, and with it, his sense of direction. His mother, in an attempt to bring some change into his environment, brought home a small cat. There was no grand expectation behind this decision. It was a simple hope that something living, something small and gentle, might create a shift. At first, the young man did not respond. He barely acknowledged the animal, but the cat did not withdraw. It stayed close, it rested near him. It existed in the same space without pressure or demand. Gradually, something subtle began to change. The presence of another living being created small points of interaction, feeding it, noticing it, adjusting to its needs. These were not dramatic actions, but they introduced structure back into his day. He later described it in very simple terms. He said the cat gave him a reason to get up in the morning. Not a life-changing revelation, not an overwhelming transformation, just a reason. And sometimes that is enough to begin moving again. Psychologists refer to this kind of effect in terms of animal-assisted support, but behind the terminology is a very basic human truth. Connection, even in its simplest form, can interrupt isolation. An interruption of isolation can be the first step toward recovery. What is often overlooked is that healing does not always begin with answers. Sometimes it begins with presence, something or someone that quietly says, "You are not alone here." There is another layer to this that people often overlook, and it is the way cats seem to interact with the emotional atmosphere of a home. Many owners notice that their cats respond differently depending on the mood of the household. When tension rises, the animal becomes more alert or cautious. When calm returns, it settles back into ease. It is as if it is constantly reading the room without ever needing words. Across different cultures and time periods, this sensitivity has been interpreted in different ways. Some saw it as instinct, others described it in more symbolic or spiritual terms. In the writings of mystics such as Hildegard of Bingen, there is a recognition that creation contains layers of perception that humans do not fully understand. Life, in her view, is not limited to what is visible or immediately explainable. This leads to a question that many people ask in quiet reflection. Do animals, especially cats, have a soul or a deeper inner life? There is no simple or final answer to that within formal theology. What can be said with honesty is that they display awareness, responsiveness, and emotional connection in ways that go beyond basic mechanical behavior. They form bonds, they show preference, they react to suffering and comfort. They choose proximity or distance. Whether one defines that as soul or something else depends on belief, but it clearly points to a level of existence that invites respect rather than dismissal. I once spoke with an elderly couple who had been married for decades. After their children moved out, their home became noticeably quieter. The absence was not only physical but emotional. The rhythm of daily life had changed, and with it a sense of shared purpose had faded. In that silence, they decided to bring a cat into their home. It was not presented as a solution to loneliness or a fix for their marriage. It was simply an addition to their life, something living to share the space with them. What followed was not dramatic, but it was meaningful. The cat created shared responsibilities, feeding it, caring for it, talking about its behavior, laughing at its habits. These small moments became part of their daily interaction again. Over time, they began to reconnect through these simple routines. The woman later said that the cat had helped bring life back into their relationship, not by solving their past issues, but by giving them something gentle and shared to care for together. This connects to a broader truth about human life that is often underestimated. Loneliness is not just emotional discomfort. It has measurable effects on health and well-being. Research has shown that long-term isolation can impact the body in ways similar to chronic stress and other harmful conditions. Human beings are biologically wired for connection. A cat does not replace human relationships. It does not resolve every aspect of loneliness, but it interrupts it. It introduces rhythm, interaction, and presence into a space that might otherwise remain silent for long periods. In Japanese thought, there is a concept called ikigai, often described as a reason for being. It does not always refer to something large or extraordinary. Sometimes it is found in very small responsibilities, a daily task, a living being that depends on you, a reason to continue moving through the day. For some people, that reason can be a career or a mission. For others, it can be something as simple as a pet waiting for them at home. These small anchors of meaning are often more important than people realize, especially during difficult periods of life. Throughout history, cats have also been associated with a kind of boundary between the visible and the unseen. In various cultures, they were seen as animals that seemed aware of things beyond ordinary perception, whether in medieval Europe, Celtic folklore, Islamic tradition, or Japanese culture. Similar impressions appear repeatedly. Cats were often treated with a mixture of respect, caution, and admiration. This does not need to be interpreted as superstition. It can also be understood as a recognition that cats experience the world differently. They are attentive to detail, responsive to change, and highly sensitive to their environment. They remind us that not everything important is loud or obvious. Some of the most meaningful aspects of life are subtle, quiet, and easily missed if we are not paying attention. And perhaps that is the final lesson here. Not that cats are magical beings, but that they help return us to a simpler way of being, a way that values presence over distraction, calm